My dad is not a believer in therapy. Combat veteran, PTSD suffering. Because of some disagreements with the VA, he was nudged into having to talk to a therapist. And when he left that consultation or that 1 hour session, I asked, how was it? And he said, you know what, I should be a therapist. She just kind of sat there with her notepad and I did all the talking. And you know how much they charge? $1 bazillion an hour. And when my mom would say he needs a therapist, my dad would say, if he needs somebody to talk to, he can come talk to me. And I won't even charge him $150 an hour. Sometimes my dad was a little unsympathetic when my mother would suggest therapy. And he would say, really? He's having issues. And he would say to my mom, Sharon, when I was 19 years old, I put an M16 over my shoulder and I walked into the jungle until they started shooting at me. And they blew up my friends in front of me. What, pray tell, issues do you think David has? He didn't have a lot of sympathy towards that approach. My dad is not a believer in treatment. He says somewhere along the third rehab, I stopped believing in treatment. And it's interesting because I own and operate and work in treatment, so apparently my dad does not believe in what I do, which is kind of an interesting statement. But he looks at it as just a big old waste of money, you know, and for him, that's the evidence. A lot of money, you go in. My dad is not a believer in treatment. My dad is not a believer in a medical model. You know what my dad is a believer in, like many, many dads? My dad is a believer in the get a damn job and quit doing drugs model of addiction recovery. And there is no other way for him to look at it. Now, we can argue that he's right or we can argue that he's wrong. My dad says, you know what, David, I used to drink pretty heavily after Vietnam, and one day I looked around at my life and I made a decision and I quit. And my dad, if you meet him, he will give you his program of recovery. And it's basically a 2-step program. It's not a 12-step program. It's a 2-step. And here's how it goes. Step number 1, you got to pick a day. He goes, I picked a day. You got to stick to that day. You make a decision to quit on that day, and you decide to quit, and you quit. Step 2 says, David, every time I think about having a drink, and I do at times, I tell myself, Dennis, do not have that drink. And I don't. It's a 2-step program of recovery, and he does pretty darn well. It's been working for 20 years. And my dad, like a lot of dads, has the same attitude. My brother, who's watching all my ups and downs and craziness and bailouts and all this stuff, my brother's doing pretty well. He's going to college, he's getting his degrees. He's not getting fired every 15 minutes. He's getting married. He's looking at my stuff, and he's getting a little irritated, and he knows what the problem is. He says, Mom and Dad, the problem is you guys. You guys keep enabling him. My brother has a punitive or consequential model. Basically, he knows or feels in his heart that the reason I'm not changing is because I haven't experienced the consequences of my lifestyle choice. And people that are believers in a punitive or consequential model, you'll know because they use the word, the phrase, he hasn't reached his bottom yet. When he reaches his bottom, then he'll change. You need to quit taking him back. You need to quit letting him in. My ex-wife's family, they were big believers. Her friends were big believers in this. Why did you take him back? There are plenty of good guys out there. You could have anybody. You took him back. What is wrong with you? He needs to feel the consequences. You guys always rescue him. You bail him out. So my brother knew that we needed to kind of throw me out when I hit the streets. Then I'd change. Now my grandmother, who had a faith, my grandmother looked at it spiritually. For her, she knew it wasn't much psychotherapy or issues or any of that kind of stuff. She knew what the problem was, and it was in a spiritual plane. She knew that I needed to accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And if I were willing, if I just surrendered, He can enter my life and remove the obsession to drink or do drugs. Because she'd seen it happen. She'd seen miracles in her church, and she would say things like, David, do you want to come to church with me? They won't judge you there. Why don't you come to church with me one of these times? My aunt and my grandmother, they had a prayer list. My aunt still has it. My grandmother's passed away, but my aunt still has it on her window. I saw it a few months ago. And it has all the names on the prayer list, and there is my name. She takes all the credit. Actually, She gives it all to God. She says, I know what did it for you. And it's her way of looking at it. Now, if you look, and I've just talked about 4 different family members, and I could go through a dozen, but in just these 4 family members, they all have different ways of looking at the problem and different ways of looking at the solution. And they're not in agreement. My mother says David needs to get professional help. He needs to go away to a treatment program. And he's got deep-seated psychological, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. And my dad says, you know what's wrong? He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have a house. Once he gets a family, he'll get responsible. He don't need to, my mom's like, no, he doesn't need to work right now. He needs to work on his recovery. And my dad says, yeah, work on getting a job first, and then he can work on his recovery. My brother shows up. He's like, y'all need to kick him out. My mother says, why? He'll die out there. You remember what happened. You remember when those drug dealers almost killed him. You want that to happen to your brother? And my grandmother shows up and she says, y'all need to go to church. And they're all in agreement there's a problem, but nobody's in agreement about how the problem or how to fix the problem. And these are models or ways of looking at the problem. And when we started doing interventions, we noticed that one of the biggest hurdles that we had is that if the family is on different pages, if they're all looking at things differently, then they end up working chaotically. So one of our biggest challenges was to get families on the same page. And what we discovered is you can look at it spiritually, you can look at it biologically, medically, any of these things. But what we found is a way of looking at it that puts the family in agreement. And I'm going to say a sentence and see if you agree with it, everybody here. Forget about the drugs for a minute. Forget about the drugs, how much or how often, any of that stuff. Let's suggest that maybe they aren't just addicted to drugs. That what I was really addicted to, that addicts are really addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, etc. And when I say that statement, if you think about your loved one and you try to have a conversation with them, an uncomfortable one, and they say, I don't want to talk about it right now, I don't want to deal with this. They get upset or storm out or walk out. Addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, responsibilities. And that was my addiction, and I had had it before I ever picked up my first drink or drug, and everybody missed it. I've been working on the wrong drug of choice my whole life. Addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, and I'm going to prove it to you. And what's neat is when I say this line, when I'm in a family group and I've got brothers and sisters and nobody on the same page, the minute I say that line, they all nod their heads. Whether he's a 19-year-old who doesn't want to make the next move, or whether it's a 78-year-old and we're trying to talk to him, grumpy old dad in the darkened room, sipping a beer, TV on, smoking a cigarette. I don't want to talk about it right now. I had a rough day. I'll deal with this later. Or whether it's a 19-year-old, etc. So I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to prove it to you that addicts are addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, etc. And let's erase my family. Oops, sorry. So I'm going to give you guys 2 options. I'm going to give you 2 different ways of looking at this stuff. And you guys, anybody that's connected to people that are in addiction or whatever it is, abusers, addicted, dependent, whatever term you want to use. I'm going to give us 2 options, 2 treatment plans. In my world or my story right now, there are 2 options. So think of your loved one, think of somebody who's struggling with addiction. I'm going to give them 2 options. Option A, I'm going to give them a therapist only that they like, that they connect with. And they don't even have to come to the therapist's office. I'm going to send the therapist to their home to spend a couple hours a week with that therapist. So 2 times a week, hour each time, therapist only. He or she will like that therapist, and you don't have to do anything else. And I'm going to take away all the negative consequences around their life. If they've got legal consequences, I'll put it on hold for a year, because we need them to focus only on their stuff. I'm going to take away all the stressors and external factors, right? So that the client and the therapist can work together. They will trust that therapist, they will like that therapist, and this is the only treatment. They don't have to go to AA meetings or NA or detox or any of that stuff, okay? And I want to be honest with you that this solution here has about a 2% chance. Actually, if they're really willing, I'm going to make it a 4%. Not criticizing therapists, but I'm saying if that's the only treatment plan, we're talking 2 hours a week for a week. Okay, 4% if you're really willing. Okay, or option B. Now hear me out on this one. They're going to get on a plane with me today. And there is a 2-year lockdown program. Just hear me out though. The first year, they can have no contact with the outside world. Not you, not their kids, not their loved ones, nobody. And the reason is because we don't want to distract them. We need to work on the inside as we tear them down, build them back up again. There's every form of therapy under the sun. There's didactic, there's groups, there's process groups, there's CBT, DBT, REBT, aversion therapy, name it. There's everything under the sun. The second year, we're going to work on relationships. They're going to have contact with you. We'll start to learn how to have healthy relationships with themselves, with the world around them, with their loved ones, with a God, if they have a faith. And in 2 years, this program is so good it has a 100% guarantee for life. Okay? So, option A or option B, there is no option C. Which one are they going to pick?
A.
You said B. Wrong. I have never had them choose option B. I've had them say they would consider option B. But when it came down to it, and I'm not talking about unwilling people, I'm talking about willing people, option A every single time. Now, they might say, they might have a rational, and it's not that they're idiots. It's not that they're dumb. It goes like this. You know what? 2 years. I mean, like I got, I got a job, I got all this stuff going on, and I'm willing. Like I'm not like an unwilling person. I'm willing to change my life, to turn it around. I'm the one that came to you for help. Let me do this one. Let me do this one, and I'll give it my all. And I promise you, if it doesn't work, I'll do option B. And they, just like me, will spend the next 20 years of their life promising option B tomorrow, but choosing option A. And I'm giving you the first hint that there is something else driving the bus. See, they chose based on the wrong statistic. They did not choose based on the most important statistic, which is the success rate. They choose based on a statistic I didn't put up there, which is the comfort rate. We operate based on comfort and not success. And one of the biggest frustrating parts for families often is that we'll have a mom or a dad or whoever have you, and they only care about the success rate. What's the most successful program? I have never had a person ask me, I've never had anybody walk in this room and ask, what's the most successful treatment program if they're an addict? They don't ask those questions. Having done interventions, when you do an intervention, an interesting thing happens. You have a family and you have a loved one, and everybody, almost everybody has had an intervention on them sooner or later. Life itself intervenes. Whether it's the full-blown professional intervention with an interventionist and we're reading letters like the TV show and stuff like that, or the boss. If you come in late again, we're going to fire you, or legal. No, you're on probation, pee in a cup. Life itself begins to have interventions. But having done the professional guided read letters interventions, an interesting thing happens. There comes a point where they understand what this is about. And not everybody on an intervention is unwilling. A lot of times the family system, they don't know how to ask for help. There are times I've shown up and they just cry and they're like, I prayed for this. Oh my God, I'll go. But before I go, can I ask a few questions about the treatment? They always ask questions, and you would too. It's not because they're idiots. They kind of want to know. You would too. You wouldn't just be like, sure, I'll go, I'll just follow you. You might say, I'm willing to get help, but you're going to ask questions. All human beings do. In all the years of doing interventions, I've never had anybody ask a rational question about the success rate of the treatment program. You know what they ask? They ask emotional questions based on the comfort rate. Do you know what questions people ask on an intervention or in life about treatment. They ask, oh, okay, cool. How long? How far is it or where is it? Can I leave if I want to? Can I smoke is an important one. If you've ever been to a facility with non-smoking, oh, they ask that right away. Better be smoking facility. Can I get my own room? Is it Can I bring my phone? Exactly, phone. Is it co-ed? Because I won't be around a bunch of dudes, you know what I'm saying? I want some ladies. I'm not going to hook up. I just don't like a bunch of dudes, and stuff like that. What do they do on the weekends? How's the food? If you're in exercise, some people ask different things. Is they have yoga? Is they have workout? That kind of stuff. Now, here's the interesting point. Even the willing ask this. Even somebody 100% willing to change their life will ask these questions. Something else is driving the bus. The questions they don't ask is what's the success rate, et cetera, et cetera. And you would think that would be an important question. Let me reframe it. Let me look at it in a different way. Somebody very close to me was once diagnosed with cancer, which is apparently a crappy day. She said, I hope you never experience that moment where she walked into the doctor's office cancer-free and then walked out of there apparently diagnosed with cancer. And I guess doctors aren't real nice about it. They're just like, you have cancer. They're not like, there, honey. They're voila. And once she got over the initial blow, she began to ask questions about the treatment. And she did not ask, how's the food? Does it have a pool? Can I get my own room? Can I smoke? Can I bring my phone? You know what she asked? She asked questions about the most important statistic on this, the survival rate. Who is the best cancer doctor in the Chicagoland area? If I double the radiation, will it double my chances of killing the cancer? If I eat less carbs, if I do hot yoga, if I exercise more, if I jog, because I used to jog a lot, I was in better shape. If I don't drink Diet Coke, will it increase my chances? Who's the best thyroid surgeon, et cetera, et cetera? Insane she would sound, right? Does it have a pool? Admittedly, she asked one comfort-based question. She asked, will I lose my hair?